Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltia's Gaming, and in this video we're doing Pimp My Build. Yes, it's back. This time with Chef, a magic sorc that wants to improve her DPS. But first we want to hear specifically from her, what does she want to get out of this experience in her character?
Play, or like, what do you want to play?
Dungeons.
Dungeons. And when you say dungeons, you're talking vet, you're talking like
Yes.
specific ones? Anything come to mind specifically?
Well, I've been doing pledges for a while, so I can do all the basic stuff, have a lot, but really where I'm at is I can play the content that is, White Gold Tower and Imperial City Prison, but I'm not sure how effective my character is in those venues because they're more challenging. And before I start putting myself out there with groups that are doing that content, I want to make sure that my character is set up to succeed well in that venue so that I don't, create difficulty for others in my group.
Okay.
Okay, so we have an idea of what she wants to do, dungeons. White Gold Tower is going to be our goal for this entire video series. But first I want to go, what type of skills did she come in here with, and explain why or why not they're very effective. So number one here is Radiant Mage Light. Now this is kind of the PvP morph that exposes an invisible character. Not good for PvE. Why? You miss out on 5% more magic. 5% more magic on a high elf magicka sorc is a tremendous amount of DPS loss. So I recommend highly you switch that to Inner Light and double bar it. So right there, that's a huge DPS loss. Another thing is Bound Aegis. Well, Bound Aegis gives you a lot of max magic. It's not always easy to work your build around this, specifically if you're having trouble dying or playing with other players that may need help. Why? You're losing 2 ability slots on your bar. So it's very powerful, very good high-end DPS, but sometimes people need something a little more simpler or a little more flexibility, so we're going to take that out. Crushing Jack. Now this is the interrupt version, but it's a DPS loss. Why? Because you're missing out on that 10% extra damage. So we're going to have her change that morph. Crystal Frags, no-brainer. We definitely need that on our abilities. Liquid Lightning, another really powerful ability, so that's correct. And then we have Energy Overload, very, very good ability. The thing that she gets tricked up on a little bit in watching other people's videos and mine is using the third bar. So I tell her later on that if the third bar, using your execute on your third bar doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. Sometimes simple builds are the ones that work for some people. Moving on, Radiant Mage Light double barred, Bound Aegis double barred, and then Daedric Minefield. Daedric Minefield is powerful for PvP. I love it. Why? People can't jump on you. PvE, not so much, because it takes time to rearm and you can't spam cast it. Next up is Endless Fury. So this is the morph that's really good while you're leveling because it restores magic. Later on in the game though, it's not that powerful. You definitely want more damage from the explosion, so we're going to have her change that morph. Next up is Power Surge, really, really powerful. Though, if you're looking for extra slots on your bar, you could always use Spell Power Potions. But this will heal you and give you some more survivability while you're learning. And then another Energy Overload. That's okay, but usually I use Meteor on one of my bars to get a little more extra magic. And you look here, she's a High Elf Sorc Magic. That's really good. Destruction Staff and Dual Wield. Now, Dual Wield is really good because you get the extra spell damage on the back bar. But the thing about it is, some people just need something simpler. People need some more survivability with the Resto Staff using Healing Ward. So it just depends on the very particular person. You copy some of these builds that you see me play, it's meant for you, but you got to adapt it to yourself. If Dual Wield doesn't work for you and you're sitting there swinging your sword 9 times out of 10, don't do it. Swap to Resto. Also, you see a common mistake here with attributes. Almost everyone asks me, what attributes I should put in. All magic or all stamina, unless I'm playing a tank. The reason why is there's other ways to survive as a DPS than health. Health is probably not going to be your best way to survive. The best way to survive is to do so much damage, the mobs don't have a chance to kill you. So we're going to change that out. And we're going to get her a whole lot more magic. Also using the Apprentice Mundus Stone, and that's for spell power. Not very good, not very advantageous for PvE, especially when you're running all Divines gear. So PvE mobs, they don't have resistance to critical hit, so I almost always run with the Thief or the Shadow Mundus Stone. Also doing 5-1-1 combination to get higher magic, so that's very good. So let's go ahead and move over to champion points and gear. Take a look at her gear and her stats here, and you'll notice a couple things. One, she's not at CP cap, so that's hurting her max stats. But even through this process, we get her about 10,000 more magic. That adds up to a lot of damage. You take a look at her gear, and it's pretty good. All infused Julianos, which is okay. You probably want to go with Divines, like I said, for PvE. The reason I use Infuse in some of my builds for PvP is because shields. The higher the magic value, the higher your shield is. But for PvE, I strongly recommend Divines. The added benefit that you get with each piece of Legendary Divines is staggering. You also look at her 2-piece helm, so she has an Orionith that gives you a little health, Molekina gets you a little spell damage. If you're doing a Force Pulse rotation on a Magic Sorc nowadays, you really should be using an Orionith. Now, Molekina is great for doing overload spams and really nuking down a mob, but throughout the rest of the fight, you could really benefit from an Orionith. Also, you don't have to worry about the magic issues that Molekina has, especially if you're not doing a well-coordinated trial group with very specific buffs. So now my build, I've switched over to Orionith and have a lot better sustain. So Julianos, great set for those that don't have Scathing Mage. I'd recommend all Divines on that. You also notice her willpower. Some of them are robust. A lot of people buy the robust stuff because it's cheap, but remember, you're losing out on a ton of magic. So make that purchase, bite the bullet, spend 80,000 gold and get you a ring so you can get that max magic value. Swords of Torrid Pact, those are good. Definitely want to get those enchanted though, because sometimes you should be swinging those, especially in the next patch. Champion points. Got a little weird stuff going on here with quick recovery, a few in the Bastion and the Red Tree. Really, we're going to pump up Hardy and Elemental Defender and kind of drop the other stuff. So the blue tree here, Elemental Expert, Elfborn, I'm going to give her a spreadsheet that SR did and kind of give her a mathematical breakdown later of the best way to spend your champion points on a 501 setup, even though she's not there, but when she gets there, so we can explain that. Then her resource generation is a little off. Tumbling, that's a really good PvP type of passive you want to have, but if we're doing just strictly PvE, something we don't want to focus on. Bashing Expert, Tenacity, even those are a small amount of points, they add up to a big difference overall. So we're going to respec that. We're going to respec all of her skills. We're going to take care of her gear. Going to force her to buy that willpower stuff, even though she's cheap, but it makes a big difference later on. So now what I want to do here is take her through, after we get all those things done, specifically her skills and loadout, and then practice. Before we get to the practice phase, we got to do the uncomfortable thing of getting a DPS parse beforehand, before we do all these changes, so we can see just how much we benefit from this training. So what I'm doing here is just tanking this little boss in Wayrest and just watching what she does and watching how she reacts, how she's weaving, and what buffs she's keeping up. So as you can see here, she's doing a good Force Pulse weave, but also you can see her hands are purple, leaving a big huge damage frag waiting to be cast and not casting it. Also, she's not maintaining Liquid Lightning, and you can notice right there hard cast Crystal Frags. Hard cast Crystal Frags kill your DPS. They kill your cost, they kill your damage, and it's something you definitely don't want to do. Right there, another hard cast. So there's a couple of different ways to get over that, but look at her right now. Her time on target. She ran out of magic, so you saw her kind of struggle to do something. As soon as you stop doing damage, well, your damage per second goes down. So you have to find a way to do damage constantly. If you're out of magic, pop a potion, or rip off a fully charged heavy attack, use an ability that gives you something back like Overload, but don't just stand there. Remember, time on target will kill your DPS. Also, a lot of DPS that have been helping recently do not reapply buffs during the fight, so she's doing a pretty good job of doing that. But notice, as a Magic Sorc, once the health gets down to about 20%, what should you be doing? Buff, spam, execute. Execute that sucker. So doing that Mage's Fury over and over, or just doing Overload. And so we get it killed, and unfortunately we got some low DPS numbers, as we got her 8,000 single target DPS through this fight. So we got room for monster improvement. In fact, we double her DPS.
The way to DPS, and I tell people, is buff, spam, execute. Buff, spam, execute. Buff, spam, execute. So what that means is, before you start the fight, you're going to buff. So you're going to get Crit Surge up, you're going to get your Ward up, you're going to get Proxy Dead up, and then it's going to be spam, or use your attacks. So it's going to be, this, it's going to be Force Pulse, Crystal Frags when it's up, and then execute. Your execute starts at 20% of the boss's health, okay? So when you see that boss at 20% health, your brain needs to go, shut down whatever I'm doing and execute. That's all I got to do. What I tried to do before that is up is make sure my dots are back up. So I'll recast Liquid Lightning, I'll recast Elemental Blockade, and I'll just spam Mage's Fury. Buff, spam, execute. Buff, spam, execute. Does that make sense?
It does, perfect. Because in fact, I have the execute on this bar because this is...
And you can do that, but sometimes it's too complicated. And sometimes people just need to simplify it up. And, you know, you can have 3 bars, and that's great, and that's fancy, but that doesn't work for everybody.
Well, gang, that's it for part 1. Come back for part 2, which we change her skills, CP gear, and loadout, and get her ready with a lot of practice DPS and explaining how to use those skills in combat and outside. The most important thing, which is buff and maintaining those buffs. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, leave some comments, let me know if you like this content, and we'll be back very soon with Chef Pimp My Build Part 2.